So by the way, I am 𝗕𝗢𝗖𝗨𝗧𝗜𝗢. So for this video, I discuss to you all about an introduction to Philippine historiography. So now, my reflection about an introduction to Philippine historiography. Philippine history is important because you have to understand and know the things that happened in the past for you to appreciate the future and present situation of the country. Many problems, features, and characteristics of modern Philippine society can be traced back to historical question on our colonial past. Identity evolution has its own stories that have been passed and studied by the historians. History, we are able to learn the how institutions and programs have been formed as well as how it greatly contribute to where we are now. History serves as an inspiration. Upon going through the history, it was such an inspiration on how the country's phenomenon catered their bravery and intellectual capabilities to contribute to the well-being of the Philippines. Those studying history also serves as appreciation for all the heroes and acts of bravery our countrymen have done before. However, our importance of studying Philippine history is we can be inspired with greatness from our heroes that free us from colonizers. Their stories tell us to be our greatness selves for the country. There are the Philippine Historical Association is the largest professional of historians in the Philippines, founded in 1955 by a group of prominent Filipino historians which includes 𝗕𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗡𝗧𝗜𝗢, renowned for promoting distinctly nationalist point of view of Filipino historians. 𝗕𝗢𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗡𝗧𝗜, Filipino historian, author, and politician, wrote 67 books and 500 articles about history. 𝗕𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗡𝗧𝗜, a Filipino historian, known for being part of the Philippine historiography. They include letters, diaries, journals, newspapers, photographs, and other immediate accounts, and the interpretation and evaluation of this source.
Hello everyone, so by the way, I am 𝗕𝗢𝗖𝗨𝗧𝗜𝗢. So for this video, I discuss to you my reflection all about history of the Philippine Islands. So now, my reflection about the history of the Philippine Islands. I have learned something that was not taught during my high school and elementary days. In the module that I was read, there were several conflicting ideas that Norga had about the history of the Philippines with that really happened in the Philippines. An example of this was in the case of how Magellan died of a disease and was attacked by the natives, which wasn't really true since the natives were only defending their territory, which was a basic human instinct. Here we can see how the Spaniards think in their own perspective. They were the ones helping us, but in our perspective, they are just using us and also destroying our progress, which was stated by Rizal's annotation, like what the Spaniards believed that before became there was darkness, but Rizal points in another perspective that when the Spaniards came there was darkness. Now, although the book was more geared towards Spanish perspective, Murga was still able to provide positive information about the island's early inhabitants and reliable accounts of pre-Christian religion and social customs. However, some inconsistency with how Spaniards think has pointed out by Rizal, such as the example of Borneo. Borneo, which was conquered by Spain, was not declared a territory of the Philippines. If the Spaniards had the logic of what conquered is there, then the question remains. Borneo is not a part of the Philippines. Also, the book states on how some natives in the Philippines betrayed their own kind by siding with the Spaniards, but in reality, it can be said that the natives that they were called to be inferior to them were in fact using the Spaniards, which was quite ironic. Hello everyone, so by the way, I am 𝗕𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗡𝗧𝗓. So for this video, I discuss to you my reflection all about the manunggal jar. So now, my reflection about the manunggal jar. The manunggal jar was found has definitely something to do with the jar's design and symbolism. As I look on the map, I've noticed that the 𝗕𝗢𝗙𝗡𝗧 are surrounded with bodies of water with islands and islets. People from this area tend to live their lives connected with the sea and the forest. They use this as their means of transportation. They hunt and get food from here. They simply live their life revolving in these areas, so that the jar is a secondary burial jar excavated from a Neolithic burial site in the Manunggal Cave of the 𝗕𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗡 at Lipunan Point in Palawan, Philippines. It dates from 890 to 710 BC, and the two prominent figures at the top handle of each cover represent the journey of the soul to be afterlife. The manunggal jar shows that the Filipinos' maritime culture is paramount, that it reflected its ancestor religion beliefs. Sleeping around the Philippines will still households go to the next life. Aboard boats pass through the river and seas. However, the cradle of the Philippine civilization, the history of Palawan, is recorded through fossils and artifacts used by early human dwellers in the early part of the Holocene. Physical anthropologists examine the bones, a skull cap, found in 𝗕𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗡 and determined it to be about 47,000 years old. Hello everyone, good day. By the way, I am 𝗕𝗛𝗟𝗧𝗓𝗏. For this video, I discuss to you my reflection about the Laguna Copper Plate. So now, my reflection about the Laguna Copper Plate. The Laguna Copper Plate inscription is the earliest known written document found in the Philippines. The plate was found in 1989 by a laborer near the mouth of the Lambong River in Barangay Wawa, Lumbon, Laguna. The inscription on the plate was first deciphered by Dutch anthropologist Anton Posma. The Laguna Copper Plate is a 10-piece of black-canned metal that was purchased by the National Museum of the Philippines in 1990 after the former owner failed to find a private buyer. Following a careful examination of the plate, it was found to be a 20 centimeter square copper plate covered on one side by a thin line inscription of finely written characters, unable to decipher it themselves. The museum gave the text to the anthropologist Anton Posma, who was based in the Philippines with his Filipino wife. To analyze, upon carefully analysis of the text, Posma discovered that it is identified the date of the copper plate creation as the year of Sakya, 822 months of Via Sakya, which translates to April or May in the year 900 in the Gregorian calendar. Prior to the disappearing of the text on the Laguna Copper Plate, historians had almost universally accepted that the history of the Philippines only dates back to 1521, when records had not the arrival of the Magellan and Crusader Antonia Pigafetta on the archipelago. Further information was drawn from the subject matter. According to Posma, the copper plate forgives the descendant of Namwaran from a debt of 926.4 grams of the gold, as granted by the chief of Tondo in Manila, and the authorities of a number of locations in Luzon. This also provides evidence for historians stating outright that the archipelago was a nation with rulers at the time. Hello everyone, good day. By the way, I am 𝗕𝗛𝗟𝗧𝗓𝗏. So for this video, I discuss to you my reflection about duties of the Katipunan of the Sons of the People, or 𝗕𝗙𝗙𝗃𝗃. So now, my reflection about the duties of the Katipunan of the Sons of the People, or 𝗕𝗙𝗃𝗃. For me, I think the criteria ng Katipunan better suits the needs of Philippine society during the time of revolution. while the 𝗕𝗪𝗪 of the duties of the sons of the people is now for our modern days. The kartilya ng Katipunan was longer, more literary and philosophical. It presented its concept of virtuous living as lesson for self-reflection, rather than as direct prescription. It asserted that it was the internal, not the external qualification that make human greatness. The kartilya ng Katipunan comprises 13 lessons that detail not only the vision of the Katipunan, but the vision for an equalitarian and morally sound Filipino nation. While quality, the true 𝗕𝗪𝗪 by Apolinario Mabini presents his 10 commandments which focuses on God and on the country. The first, 𝗕𝗪𝗪 orders everyone to love and honor God and honor above all things. On the second, 𝗕𝗪𝗪, Mabini encouraged us to always worship God and to always do good accordance with our own conscience. The third one says that everyone must use their special gift from God in order to act in accordance with what is true, and so on and so forth. However, the Philippine National Police vision that states, imploring the aid of the Almighty, by 2030 we shall be a highly capable, effective, and credible police service working in partnership with a responsive community towards the attainment. And this, the Philippine Army Service mission of the military is to uphold the sovereignty of the Republic of the Philippines, to uphold the Constitution, and to defend the country from all enemies, both foreign and domestic, to advance national goals, interests, and policies, and to organize the organization, maintenance, development, and distribution of the aid troops and civilians for national security. However, construct a 𝗕𝗪𝗪 for the present day heroes like these COVID-19 frontliners. We salute to all healthcare workers and frontliners. We are currently helping in the COVID-19 situation. We applaud your sacrifice and dedication to serve our fellow countrymen during this difficult time. We want you to focus on the more important task at hand. With this, we hope that you'll have one less thing to worry about, so you can concentrate in your selfless efforts to help the country in the pandemic. It is unlike you are heroes because you are strong to give help people or our country, that the theme of heroes of Katipunan in our country. Hello everyone, good day. By the way, I am 𝗕𝗪𝗖𝗨𝗪𝗧𝗔. So for this video, I discuss to you my reflection about pre-16th century Philippines reading materials, the Austronesian historical and comparative perspective. So now, this is my reflection. Our knowledge and understanding of the origins, development, and characteristics of the Austronesian speaking population of Southeast Asia and Oceania have increased innumerable through the work of the comparative Austronesian project based at the Research School of Pacific and Asian Studies. Australian National University, the driving force behind this ambitious and wide-ranging program is James Fox. Two other distinguished Austronesian watchers, Peter Bellwood and 𝗕𝗢𝗢𝗖𝗎 have joined with Fox to produce this present high-quality edited text comprising 17 chapters written by mainly Australian-based specialists. The chapters are divided into two main sections, the first concentrating on origins and dispersals, and the second on interaction and transformation. The value of the volume lists, as its title suggests, in its adoption of comparative and historical perspective, and in bringing together contribution from a variety of disciplines. There are papers by archaeologists, linguists, prehistorians, biologists, and historians. But in my view, the major orientations and preoccupations of the book are presented for particular papers. Tryon considers the Proto-Austronesian language and the problems of categorizing the major Austronesian linguistic subgroups. Bellwood rehearses treatments and issues in the origin and southward expansion of Austronesian from a Taiwanese homeland formed about 5,000 years ago, and ultimately from earlier centers of agricultural development and expansion in subtropical southern China. Fox discusses the idioms and metaphors used by Austronesians to define their ideas of origin in subsequent social differentiation. And Clifford rather examines the context and processes of Austronesians' socio-cultural and economic diversification into non-agricultural activities. The Austronesians' language form a single and relatively close phoneme, similar in its degree of internal diversity and time, deep to other major language families such as Austro-Uralic, Uto-Arctican, and Indo-European. Prior to AD 1500, the Austronesian languages belong to the most widespread language family in the world, with a distribution extending more than halfway around the globe, from Madagascar to Easter Island. However, the Austronesian speaking peoples comprise most or all of the indigenous population of Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Madagascar. Austronesian language are also found on Taiwan, the possible homeland of the first 𝗧𝗎𝗓𝗡𝗧s. In parts of Saturn, the 𝗧𝗎𝗓𝗡𝗧s-speaking population of the world are estimated to number more than 270 million people, living in a broad swath around half the globe, from Madagascar to Eastern Island and from Taiwan to New Zealand. The 17 papers in the volume provide a general survey of this diverse population, focusing on their common origins and historical transformations. The papers examine current ideas on the linguistics, prehistory, and typology, and recorded history of the 𝗧𝗎𝗓𝗡𝗧s. This volume is a publication of the Research School of Pacific and Asian Studies Comparative Australasian Project. Hello everyone, good day. By the way, I am 𝗕𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗡𝗧𝗜𝗢𝗥. So for this video, I discuss to you my reflection about the 16th to 18th century Philippines, costumes of the Tagalog. So now, this is my reflection. Juan de Francisca was a Spanish father of the Franciscan order. He was among the first group of Franciscan missionaries who arrived in the Philippines on July 2, 1578. He was tasked by the King of Spain to document the costume and traditions of the colonized based on arguably his own observation and judgments. He spent most of his missionary life in the Philippines, where he found numerous towns in Luzon and authored several religious and linguistic books, most notably the Doctrina Christina, or Christian Doctrine, the first book ever printed in the Philippines costume of the Tagalogs. Is a part of longer monographs written by the chroniclers of the Spanish expeditions to the Philippines during the early and 17th centuries. They appeared initially Bar and Robert, the Philippine Islands, 1903, and in the Philippine Journal of Science, 1958. The cultus of the Tagalogs mainly focus on the government, administration of justice, its inheritance, and doubtless Juan de Plasencia mentioned in his account that every barangaya tribal gathering counts of 30,100 families, together with the slaves, have their own tsuno at the top of the social status, who governed the people and was the captain in their wars, followed by the mabukas, commoners, and slaves. Plasencia described how children we divide between the myriad mahaks and slave na mamahay or sa gigilid. Pascal note the Dewey system that was practiced by the native Tagalogs. Downies were given by the men to the women's pants before marriage. Moreover, Blanca mentored the worship of the Tagalogs, noting at the Filipinos have no templates, but they have what they all simbahan, which means a place of adoration, because this is where they gather when they wish to the feast called pander or worship. He also mentioned that Filipinos worship ideals, and one of them is what they call Bathala, which signifies all-powerful or maker of all things. They also worship sun, the moon, and even the stars. They have idols such as 𝗕𝗢𝗢𝗪𝗓, the patron of Lavin, Lakapan, and Injali. Patrons of cultivate Landa. They also had he commented that Filipinos are really able to find auguries in things they witness and also practice donation. However, he noted here that such beliefs were already erased through the teaching of the Holy Gospel. This account of Juan de Plasencia strengthens the claim that even before the 𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗡, the Filipinos already have their own set of tradition, customs, practice, beliefs, and gifts that they aside so he provide information that are helpful for today's generation in understanding all history and in discovering practice that are no longer practiced today even now. It is noticeable some of the practice during the 16th century are still practiced by some ethnic groups. Here in the Philippines, the Bagubo system, for example, which requires the bride to be father to make a returns present equivalent to one half of whatever agreed upon as dowry, and there are still people, especially the eldest, that believes in the existence of walang and unaim the concept of barangays mal-evident into the generation. It is undeniable that our customs and practice change along with time. However, there are still fragments of our past that seem and will continue to remind us of our origin. It is such an honor knowing about our history and being able to discover how right the Philippines was in terms of our customs, belief, and practice.
Hello everyone, good day. By the way, I am 𝗕𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗧𝗢𝗢. So for this video, I discuss to you my reflection about 19th century Philippines, a visit to the Philippine Islands. So now, this is my reflection. 340 years ago, the Portuguese navigator Fernando de Magallanes, more generally known by his Spanish designation Magallanes, proposed to Carlos an expedition of discovery in the eastern seas. The conditions of the contract were signed at Zaragoza, and with a fleet of 6 vessels, the largest of which was only 130 tons burden, and the whole number of the crews 234 men, Magallanes passed the straits which bear his name in November 1520. In the middle of March of the following year, he discovered the Mariana Islands, and a few days afterwards land on the eastern coast of the island of Mindanao. where he was well received by the native population. He afterwards visited the island of Cebu, where, notwithstanding a minute resistance from more than 2,000 armed men, he succeeded in conciliating the king and his court, who were not only baptized into the Catholic faith, but recognized the supreme sovereignty of the crown of Spain, and took the oaths of subjection and vigilance, the king being engaged in hostilities with his neighbors. Magallanes took part therein, and did in Mactan on the 26th April 1521, in consequence of the wounds he received. This disaster was followed by the murder of all the leading persons of the expedition, who, being invited to a feast by their new enemy, were treacherously assassinated. Galen de Porcelito alone escaped of the 26 guests who formed the company. 3 the fleet had been lost before they reached the Philippines. 1 only returned to Spain, the Victoria, the first that had ever made the voyage round the world, and Spanish king conferred on her commander Elcano, a Biscayan, an escutcheon bearing a globe with the inscription Primus circumdet me. A second expedition, also composed of 6 vessels and a trader, left Spain in 1524. The whole fleet miserably perished in storms and contests with the Portuguese in the Moluccas, and the trader alone returned to the Spanish possessions in New Spain. About 120 of the expedition landed in Tidore, where they built themselves a fortress, and were relieved by a 3rd fleet sent by Hernan Cortes in 1528 to prosecute the discoveries of which Magallanes had the initiative. The 3rd adventure was as disastrous as those which had preceded it. It consisted of 3 ships and 110 men, bearing large supplies and costly presents. They took possession of the Marianas Ladrone Islands in the name of the King of Spain, reached Mindanao and other of the southern islands, failed twice in the attempt to reach New Spain, and finally were all victims of the climate and of the hostility of the Portuguese. But the Spanish court, determined to preserve, and the Viceroy Mendoza of New Spain was ordered to prepare a 4th expedition, which was to avoid the Molucca Islands, where so many misfortunes had attended the Spaniards. The fleet consisted of 3 ships and 2 traders, and the commander was Villalobos. He reached the archipelago and gave to the islands the name of the Philippines in honor of the Prince of Asturias, afterwards Philip II. Contrary wines, in spite of the royal prohibition, drove them into the Moluccas, where they were ill received by the Portuguese and ordered to return to Spain. Villalobos died in Amboina, where he was attended by the famous missionary Saint Francisco Xavier. Death swept away many of the Spaniards, had a few who remained were removed from the Moluccas in Portuguese vessels. A fifth expedition on a larger scale was ordered by Philip II to conquer, pacify, and people the islands which bore his name. They consisted of 5 ships and 400 seamen and soldiers, and sailed from La Natividad, Mexico in 1564 under the orders of Legazpi, who was nominated governor of the Philippines. With ample powers, he reached Tandaya in February 1565. Proceed to Cabilian, where the heir of the native king aid his views. In Bohol, he secured the aid and allegiance of the petty sovereigns of the island, and afterwards fixed himself on the island of Cebu, which for some time was the central seat of Spanish authority. Through the name of Manila is given to the capital of the Philippine Islands. It is only the fort and garrison occupied by the authorities to which the designation was originally applied. Manila is on the left bank of the river, while on the right, the district of Binondo is the site inhabited by almost all the merchants, and in which their business in conduct and their warehouse built. The place fills one side of a public plaza in the fortress, the cathedral another of the same locality, resembling the squares of London, but with the advantage of having its century adorned by the glorious vegetation of the tropics, whose leaves present all varieties of color, from the brightest yellow to the deepest green, and whose flowers are remarkable for their splendor and beauty. Hello everyone, good day. By the way, I am 𝗕𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗡𝗧𝗓. So for this video, I discussed to you my reflection about 1896 Philippine Revolution, Kartelyang Katipunan. So now, this is my reflection. The Kartelya ng Katipunan served as the law to the Katipuneros, which they had to follow. It believed that the Filipinos used it as a guide until the revolution against the United States. It includes oaths, orders, and teachings that the Katipuneros are bound to live by. The book of Kartelya is a narrative that provides a glimpse or details on how used to think during the revolution against the Spaniards. It gives emphasize on their main goal to fight for freedom and against oppression. I believe that this book is not just relevant to history, but it also relevant up to this day. It contains a lot of teachings that are very important to know and is still applicable even in our daily lives. One of the teachings or ideology that the 𝗕𝗙𝗪 gives us is the equality of all human beings, may it be men or women, despite all our difference and the things that we have in life. We are all equal. No one's more human than the other. Most of all, the 𝗕𝗙𝗪 of Katipunan opens the eyes of everyone to oppression. It encourages everyone to have the courage and strength to fight for their freedom. It emphasizes that the Filipinos battle for freedom. It's not a battle of one person, but a battle of everyone. They did not achieve their goal alone, but did it all together. It encourages everyone to unite and join a revolution, because that is how our ancestors achieved the freedom that we have today. In conclusion, the Book of 𝗕𝗙𝗪 ng Katipunan was the key to our nation's independence. It became the guide of the Filipinos even after the battle against the Spaniards. It is believed that we have yet to achieve our true independence, because for the Katipuneros, independence includes our political freedom and freedom from exploitation that is presumed to be not yet attained. And so, it is said that the Katipunan Revolution is an unresolved revolution that we are yet to finish. But I believe that the 𝗕𝗙𝗪 of Katipunan will always remain as the Filipinos' guide and key to complete independence and freedom up to this present and until the future. Teachings of the Katipunan. Maitim man o maputi ang kulay ng balat, lahat ng tao ay magkakapantay. Mangyayari ang isa'y higitan sa dunog, sa yaman, sa ganda, ngunit di mahigitan sa pagkatao. All persons are equal, regardless of the color of the skin. While one could have more schooling, wealth, or beauty than another, all that does not make one more human than anybody else. I grew up looking up to the wealthy, thinking how much they value worth. I do admit that I was one of the people true that being educated, wealthy, pretty, or richer will make you more than that society thinks is not because that was what the world taught me. I remember being insulted and treated differently because I did not pass the people's beauty standards. But when they need help for something related to academics, and I learned that I somewhat excel in studying, they act so nice just to ask for a favor. This made me realize that we really live in a world where your status or standing in life is so important that people treat you based solely on that. I was grateful that while growing up, I learned that life is more than that. I believe that we are great with the same work and value, and nothing can ever make us worthless. Even if you look at the bigger picture, we all have different standards when it comes to being educated or pretty. For some people, they believe that being educated is someone who was able to attend school and graduate with a degree. But for some people, including me, believes that having wisdom, the basic knowledge and awareness of the reality. Hello everyone, good day. By the way, I am 𝗕𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗡𝗧𝗜𝗢. So for this video, I discuss to you my reflection about evolution of Filipino nationalism, Mindanao Phase 2. So now, this is my reflection. Filipino nationalism refers to the establishment and support of a political identity associated with the modern nation-state of the Philippines, leading to a wide-ranging campaign for political, social, and economic freedom in the Philippines. This gradually emerged from various political and armed movements throughout most of the Spanish East Indies, but which has long been fragmented and inconsistent with contemporary definitions of such nationalism as a consequence of more than 3 centuries of Spanish rule. These movements are characterized by the upsurge of anti-colonialist sentiments and ideals which peaked in the late 19th century, led mostly by the ilustrado or land-educated elites, whether peninsularis, insularis, or native Indio. This serves as the backbone of the first nationalist revolution in Asia. The Philippine Revolution of 1896, the modern concept, would later be fully actualized upon the inception of a Philippine state with its contemporary borders, after being granted independence by the United States by the 1946 Treaty of Manila. In the years before the 11th century, the Philippines was divided into numerous principalities known as barangays, a name derived from Malayan words called balangays. These small political units were ruled by datos, rahas, or sultans. In 1565, European colonization began in earnest when Spanish explorer arrived from Mexico and formed the first European settlements in Cebu. Beginning with just 5 ships and 500 men accompanied by Augustinian monks, and further strengthened in 1567 by the 200 soldiers, he was able to repel competing Portuguese colonizers and to create the foundation for the Spanish colonization of the archipelago. In 1571, the Spanish occupied the kingdoms of Manila and Tondo and established Manila as the capital of the Spanish East Indies. This Spanish colonization united the Philippine archipelago into a single political entity. Luzon has been the dominant island since the era of Spanish colonialism and played an important role in the national movement. While predominantly Christian, the southern islands, Mindanao and the Sulu archipelago, have a significant Muslim population since the 14th century, having arrived in the island with traders and missionaries along the routes that follow Borneo's coast. The term Filipino originally referred to the Spanish Criollos of the Philippines. During their 333 years rule of the Philippines, the Spanish rulers referred the natives as Indios. Also during the colonial era, the Spaniards born in the Philippines, who were more known as Insulares, Criollos, or Creoles, were also called Filipinos. Spanish-born Spaniards or mainland Spaniards residing in the Philippines were referred to as Peninsulares. Those of mixed ancestry were referred to as mestizos. The Creoles, despite being regarded by the Peninsulares as inferior to them, had enjoyed various government and charged positions and composed the majority of the government bureaucracy. The sense of national consciousness came from the Creoles, who now regard themselves as Filipino. It was brought to its advent by three major factors: economy, education, secularization of Paris. These factors contribute to the birth of the Filipino nationalism, the opening of the Philippines to the international or world trade, the rise of the middle class, and the influx of liberal ideas from Europe were only a few examples of how the Philippines developed into a stable country. The first manifestation of the Philippine nationalism followed in the decades of the 1880s and the 1890s with a reform or propaganda movement conducted by in Spain and in the Philippines for the purpose of propagandizing Philippine condition in the hopes that desired change in the social, political, and economic life of the Filipinos would come about through peaceful means.